Today, I have another little mini budget meal plan to share with you guys. This is where I take a small budget, usually around $30, and I show you exactly what I purchased at the grocery store with that budget and how I turned it into 3 delicious dinners for my family of 5. Plus, there's an extra recipe and optional dessert. The magic of these meal plans usually comes from using some of the ingredients I purchase across multiple dishes. But don't worry, I've done the work of planning that out for you. Let me show you how I did it. Hard to believe that this tiny little grocery haul is going to yield 3 meals for my family, but I've done it before and we're going to do it again, starting with this pork roast. This is about 3 pounds. I really wish I could have found a bone-in pork roast, about 4 to 5 pounds. That's typically what I get, but the only pork roasts available at Walmart the day I was there shopping for this video were gigantic. So I ended up just getting this boneless pork roast, and it's going to be the star of 2 different meals. I've got a 3-pack of bell peppers. Asparagus has been a great price. I was going to do zucchini, but asparagus is under $2 a pound right now. So if you want to substitute a different vegetable that's in season or cheaper where you are, you can, but I picked up the asparagus. And they had a manager special on pineapples the day I was there, $1.25 for a whole pineapple. So feel free to substitute a different produce item if you want something that is in season or inexpensive at your store. Starches, I have a pound of shortcut pasta, so not long pasta like fettuccine or spaghetti noodles, and not little bitty like shells, but kind of in the middle. This is a rigatoni, a bow tie, or a fusilli to a rotini, like the curly Q's would be fine as well. A pound of white rice, and then a 20-count package of small fajita-sized tortillas. I've got a can of pinto beans, a different kind of beans, like black beans would work for the recipe I'm going to use these for, and a can of enchilada sauce, and also 1 can of condensed French onion soup. 2 different kinds of cheeses. I have 8 ounces of Sharp and 8 ounces of Parmesan, and the shredded cheese is actually cheaper right now than the block cheese. I much prefer the block cheese, but these are under $2. The block cheese is about $2.25, so I went ahead and saved myself that money since this is a budget challenge. And I'm going to be using a lot of butter in these recipes, so I went ahead and purchased a 2-stick package. If you are tight on money and don't want to purchase the full pound of butter, they are starting to carry these 2-stick packages at my Walmart. They're $2.42 at the time I'm filming this. And then totally optional, I'm going to use these 2 things, the apples and the caramel, and a few of my tortillas to try out a dessert recipe. But you don't have to add these in if you don't want to, but I like to include some kind of sweet treat in these meal plans if I can. Here are the spices, seasonings, things that I'm using from my pantry to complete this meal plan. If you don't have all of these, you might still be able to make this work. Like I've said before, a little salt and pepper, some cooking oil will often go a long way to making dishes flavorful. Now, I could have come in under $30 for that little grocery haul if I had not included some ingredients to create a dessert, but altogether, my total was $33.07 this day in April, the year of our Lord, 2025. I have my pork roast cooking directly underneath the cabinet where the camera is currently sitting, and you don't have to do this, but I like to brine my pork roasts before I cook them in the slow cooker. This is where I will just put the roast into some salt water and refrigerate it for at least overnight. In this case, it was a day and a half, about 36 hours, up to 48 hours before I'm ready to cook it. And this may sound kind of odd, but I like to use a pitcher. I have a few different sizes of plastic pitchers. I will put the roast in the pitcher and I will add 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. If you are using regular table salt, and I have done that occasionally, you need to reduce it. I usually use just 1 to 2 teaspoons of regular table salt as opposed to 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. And then I just fill it up with water until it covers the roast. I will put the lid on it and pop it into the refrigerator until the day I'm ready to cook it. And I like to use a pitcher because it's easy for me to put it into the refrigerator and then actually drain the brine out directly into the sink the day that I'm ready to cook it, and then just put the pork roast into the crock pot. It also doesn't take up as much space in my refrigerator, and it prevents any possible messes from just trying to brine it in like a plastic bag that could burst. To season my pork roast, I use kind of a standard basic meat seasoning that I use for a lot of recipes. It's a teaspoon each of salt, onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, Italian seasoning, and then some cracked black pepper to taste. Sometimes I will add a little cumin, or I will add some chili powder, or maybe some Cajun seasoning, depending on what I'm cooking. But that's sort of like the base spice rub that I use for this kind of meat. I just sprinkled that over the top of my pork roast. I kind of patted it in a little bit and then turned it over and sprinkled the rest of the seasoning on the other side. Pop the lid on, and I'm cooking this as long as I possibly can. I'm actually cooking it on high for about 6 to 7 hours until it's fork tender and ready to shred. If you have a longer amount of cook time, you could cook it on low, but I find that the longer it cooks, the better, up to 12 hours on low for a really tender, juicy roast. And no, I don't add any liquid at the beginning of the cook process because I find that it renders a lot of liquid as it cooks. And so I just don't add any broth or any oil or butter or anything at the beginning of the cook process. For a starch to go along with the cooked pork, I am going to do a French onion butter rice. I'm using 1.5 cups of white rice, rinsed, 1 can of French onion soup, 4 tablespoons of butter, 2 cups of water, plus 1 tablespoon of bouillon or broth base. Or if you don't have bouillon or broth base, or you just decide you want to do this, you could use the broth that the pork renders when it cooks. If your pork is cooked and it's just staying warm in your crock pot, you could drain off the broth that it rendered during the cook process and use it to make this rice. I'm putting all of that into a small baking dish. I'm putting it into the oven at 425 covered, and then I'm going to take the foil off and I'm going to let it cook until the rice is done and tender, until it's soaked up all of the liquid that is in the baking dish, and it will be ready to serve. I was actually an adult when I discovered that I like asparagus, and that's because I had it at a restaurant. I had it in a restaurant meal, and it was prepared in a very palatable way. That was actually the case with a lot of other vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and even cooked bell peppers. So then I decided it was time for me to learn to cook it, and I figured out the secret with asparagus is that you have to blanch it. I will bring a pot of salted water to a boil. I will slice the ends off of the asparagus, and then I will drop it into that boiling water and let it cook for just 2 minutes tops, maybe just 60 seconds if it's really thin stalks of asparagus. Then I immediately put it into a bowl of ice water to stop the cooking process and lay it out on a paper towel or a towel to dry. Then it only takes a few minutes to saute in a pan with a little bit of oil or butter. I have also roasted it in the oven on a foil lined sheet with a little bit of oil and salt and pepper. That usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes, but it's not mushy when I cook it that way, but it still cooks all the way through. So there's an idea for you if you have never cooked asparagus before or don't know how to cook asparagus. That's just the way that I do it, and even my kids like eating it that way. With my leftover pulled pork and some of my other ingredients from my mini grocery haul, I'm making a little pulled pork pasta with peppers. So I diced up all 3 of my peppers, but I actually set aside half of them. I'm only using half of them in this recipe, and I'm going to save the other half to have with dinner another night. I have a pot of salted water boiling on the stove, and I'm going to cook all of my pasta. I'm using rigatoni, but you could use another kind of shortcut pasta like a fusilli or a bow tie. In a big skillet, I have some oil heated up, and I'm going to start sauteing my peppers until they start to get tender, and then I'm going to add my seasonings. I used about half a teaspoon each of garlic salt, paprika, cumin, and oregano, and then you can add some salt and pepper according to your taste. And I just wanted to add these in with the peppers when they were finishing up cooking to help them get flavorful and to start to kind of combine those flavors all together. Now, I added my pulled pork at this time, my leftover pulled pork. I heated it up in the microwave a little bit and then added it to the pan. And if I were to do this again, I would actually not add the pulled pork until the very end and just top the pasta with the pulled pork at the end of the recipe. But you can see how it turns out and decide how you want to do it. Once my pasta is done cooking, I'm going to, before I drain it, add about 1 cup of that starchy pasta water to my pan. I want to add a little liquid, and that starchy pasta water is going to help create a really delicious sauce. I'm also adding 2 tablespoons of butter and just stirring that all together until the butter melts. Once I drain my pasta, I'm adding it back into the pan with the peppers and the meat and the sauce, and I'm going to top it with about a cup of shredded Parmesan cheese and stir that all around until it's melted. And this is why I would add the pulled pork at the end and just top each individual serving with pulled pork, because the cheese really stuck to the pulled pork and made it kind of hard to stir everything together. So I would basically cook this as is, but leave the meat out and just heat it up separately and top each serving with the pulled pork. I also sliced up my pineapple. I do have a pineapple corer, but I've already packed it away with some of the other items from my kitchen for a renovation we have coming up. So I just took the long way and cut the skin off the pineapple and then chopped it up. And I think this goes really well with pork meals. So to plate this up, I just have some of my pasta, a very big serving, and some pineapple to go along with it. And this was a really delicious meal that came together pretty quickly with the leftover pulled pork. I am making some cheesy bean and rice tacos. To get the filling going for my tacos, I started by melting about 2 tablespoons of butter in a large skillet, and then I added 1 cup of rice and a little bit of chopped onion and garlic, like maybe 1/4 of an onion and 2 cloves of garlic. You don't have to add those things if you don't want to. Once those had browned for about 2 minutes over medium heat, I turned the heat down to low and I added 1 can of pinto beans. And I like to kind of mash them up a little bit. Like, I don't want them to be refried bean consistency, but I like them to be kind of smushy. And then I added 1 can of red enchilada sauce and 1 cup of milk, which is just a little bit less than 1 full can if I'm using the enchilada sauce can as a measuring cup. Salt and pepper to taste. I added about 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a little bit of cracked black pepper. I brought that to a simmer and then I covered it and turned the heat down to low, and I set my timer for 10 minutes. And when that 10 minutes is up, I just turn the heat off, but I leave the lid on the pot. If you're using an electric stove, you might have to actually remove the pot from the heat because that stove will remain hot more than my gas stove will. But I'm gonna let that sit covered for another 10 minutes. Now you could, if you wanted to, just take that filling, put it into a tortilla with some shredded cheese and be done with it. Just have like soft tacos. I'm gonna make these crispy. So I'm gonna put a little bit of the filling onto the tortilla with some shredded cheese, fold it in half, and then I'm gonna pan fry these in a very shallow pan of oil for 1 to 2 minutes on each side. You could also pop these onto the griddle, 1 or 2 minutes on each side to make them crispy. You could put them into the oven. I probably do about 4 or 5 minutes on each side on a cookie sheet at 400. I've got the rest of my bell peppers that I chopped up from last night's meal. I'm just gonna saute those with a little bit of oil, salt, and pepper. And I'm gonna make up a little dessert with the rest of the tortillas that I have from this meal. Now, before y'all come at me for frying these things, I rarely fry anything. That is not a way that I cook typically. And that's also why I wanted to give you some other options, you know, just eating these plain, just in regular tortillas without heating them up, putting them on the griddle, putting them on the oven. But man, let me tell you, fried up, you gotta be really careful when you're frying things. That's one of the reasons why I don't do it very often, but man, We are gonna make up a little sweet treat, and I'm going for sort of an apple pie enchilada here. So you're also gonna need 6 tortillas, plus the apple pie filling that I purchased, and there's a few pantry ingredients here, including sugar and brown sugar and cinnamon. And yes, I do put a piece of bread into my brown sugar. It helps keep it soft. No, it does not mold. I don't know why I do that. I learned that years and years ago, and I have ever since, and it helps keep my brown sugar from getting really hard. So in a microwave safe bowl here, I'm putting a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and a 1/4 cup of white sugar in with my 4 tablespoons of butter, plus about a teaspoon or 2 of cinnamon, depending on how much cinnamon you like. And I'm popping that in the microwave just until the butter's melted and I can stir everything together. And I'm gonna assemble my little apple pie enchiladas here by putting some of the apple pie filling in the center of a tortilla and rolling it up and placing it in a baking dish. I would have preferred to use like a square 8 by 8 inch glass dish, but unfortunately I have already packed mine up along with several other items from my kitchen. So I do still have a pie plate, and I'm going to squeeze 6 of these little apple pie enchiladas into the pie plate. And now I am just spooning that butter and sugar mixture over the top of the enchiladas evenly. My oven is preheating to 350. I'm gonna cover my apple pie enchiladas with some foil, and I wanna bake those covered for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then I'm gonna take the foil off and bake them for an additional 10 to 15 minutes. I think I baked mine 25 minutes covered and then 10 minutes uncovered. To go along with this, I decided to serve it with that ice cream that I purchased. You could do whipped cream. You could make a little like powdered sugar glaze with just a little powdered sugar and splash of milk, kind kind of drizzle over the top of it. But these actually turned out really good. I definitely think I could tweak the recipe a little bit as far as the bake time goes. I'm interested to see how they would bake up in like a regular square baking dish. But these were a nice little, very inexpensive, sweet treat to round out this meal plan. I actually have lots of videos that are this exact format. Small budget, handful of recipes using the ingredients that I purchased from that small budget. I'll leave a few of them linked in the description box below in case you want to check out more. Plus, if you like these little mini budget meal plans, I'm actually working on a new resource that will be very helpful to you. I was hoping that it would be ready to publish alongside this video, but I still need just a few more days to tweak it. But look for that to be coming out probably in conjunction with the very next video that I make just like this one. It should be within the next few weeks. Until then, pick out one of these videos to watch next, and I'll see you there.